Hello again, friends. This is Mike, and welcome back to the Soul Unleashed podcast. Today we're going to talk about the concept of manifesting. And I've discussed this before, but what got me back to this track is I was listening recently to another podcast, and the guest on the podcast was Dr. Benjamin Hardy. And he and another gentleman named Dan Sullivan recently wrote a book called 10X is Easier Than 2X. And as I heard him explain the concept of this book, it made me think about manifesting, and I want to compare what he said with some other thinkers, Dr. Wayne Dyer, Mike Dooley, and Napoleon Hill. Here we go. Hello again, friends and fellow truth seekers. Mike Nicholas here with another episode of the Soul Unleashed podcast, where it's my goal to help you with questions you might have regarding the awakening of your soul, and particularly to help other left brain types, like I think I am, ask the right questions in our search for a deeper meaning to life. And ultimately, I want to help you unleash your soul from limiting beliefs and smothering paradigms. So let's get started on today's discussion. So this book I was listening to on the podcast with Dr. Benjamin Hardy, 10X is Easier Than 2X. It's about basically how to increase productivity in your life, and it basically says you should go through it for 10 times the result versus 2 times the result. There's some cool things that happen. But as he was discussing this, he was talking about using the future to alter the present. And part of that was, it's kind of hard actually to think about this, but the process is that you use the future to change your present behavior. And that behavior changes as you do this because you're trying to get to that result that you're setting. So what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about this book, 10X is Easier Than 2X, and then compare it to other things that I've read over the years. And I think, there's nothing new under the sun, right? I think that Sullivan and Hardy are saying, they wouldn't agree to this, I don't think, but they're saying kind of the same thing that I've heard from these other speakers and these other authors. They talk about future-driven goals. The book emphasizes setting what they call impossible goals that are so ambitious that they force you to think and act differently in the present. And these goals are not based on your current capabilities. I mean, you don't even know how to do it when you set an impossible goal, but that future vision compels you to innovate and find new pathways to success. So that's kind of cool. It also forces you to eliminate the non-essential. So to achieve 10 times growth, you have to focus on the few activities that will yield the highest returns, eliminate the 80% of the tasks and clients and behaviors that do not significantly contribute to that goal. That process of elimination is driven by a clear vision of the future. And basically, the 10 times growth is more about quality than quantity. You focus on a few key areas. But as I was listening to Benjamin Hardy, talk about this with the folks that were interviewing him, I should probably at least tribute where I saw this and heard this. It was on a podcast by Jasmine Starr, and Amy Porterfield was also on it with her, and they were both talking to Dr. Hardy. But anyway, he said things that rang a bell with me about how when you have a clear vision and a clear goal as to what you want to do and where you want to go, and it's this impossible goal, he also used the term BHAG, which some of you are familiar with, big, hairy, audacious goal. There's a whole book about BHAG. But that goal drives you to change your processes in the present, and because it's so crazy and so audacious that you throw out almost 80% of what you're doing and you change the way you do things. Now, he said something, I don't see it in the book. I purchased the book and I've been reading the book. I don't see in the book what he said on the podcast, but he said something like, things start coming your way or things start going your way once you align yourself with this goal. And I thought that is exactly what, Wayne Dyer and Mike Dooley and Napoleon Hill have said in other books that I've read. So what I want to do is just take a minute here. This is not going to be a long podcast, but I want to compare this book, which is very recent, just came out, with those other 3 authors. So just to review again with 10X is Easier Than 2X, there's basically 5 things that I think are key points about this book. One is that it emphasized the importance of having a compelling vision for the future that aligns with your intrinsic motivations. And that vision is a powerful motivator that guides your actions in the present. The second thing is you set impossible goals, and by setting seemingly impossible goals or 10x goals, you're forced to rethink your strategies and focus on high impact activities, they call them. The third thing is you have to shed limiting beliefs. So you may have a lot of beliefs in the way you do things and the way you act and processes even that you have in your current company that hold you back. And so this shift in mindset is forced by this big, hairy, audacious goal or this 10x goal. The fourth thing is that you focus on high ROI or high return of investment activities, where you focus on the 20% of what really gets you where you need to go, and you discard the other 80%. Now, that 80%, that's not original, by the way. It's called the Pareto principle. But that 80% can be people, it can be systems, it can be equipment, it can be software, applications, whatever. But you concentrate on the 20% that's getting where you want to go. And then the fifth thing is the book stresses focusing on quality over quantity, and that you focus on that 20% that gets you where you need to go. So this book does not necessarily talk about manifesting, doesn't use that term, doesn't say that's what this process is, but it approaches the concept of manifesting, in my humble opinion, with what is kind of a structured and strategic approach towards reaching goals once you set them. Now, let's compare that to some other authors, and I'll start with Napoleon Hill. Now, Napoleon Hill wrote a book way back in 1928, and it was called The Law of Success. And he updated it much later with what's called the 15th principle, which he called it cosmic habit force. But the basic thing about cosmic habit force is that there is a force in nature that once you get your goal and line up what you want to do with your goal, that things just start coming into your life, connections are made, people are met, things happen that get you when you're clearly and utterly focused on whatever your goal is. And that, to me, sounds a lot like the 10X thing, where you're focused on that goal. And the only thing about Napoleon Hill also stressed action, right? You had to take action that was along that particular path that got you that goal. He didn't use the concept of manifestation either, but he didn't know what to call it. So back in the 1920s, 1930s, when he was teaching this, I listened to a tape about this whole thing, this whole process, the law of success. I think he gave it in 1948 in Chicago. Outstanding, awesome tape. And I'll put all the resources that I'm discussing here in the show notes. But The Law of Success by Napoleon Hill is still an amazing book, an amazing tape if you want to listen to it. I love listening to it in his voice because he's talking to this crowd, and he's mesmerizing, just his voice in the way that he teaches this stuff. And I'll just cover his principles real quick. There were 14 of them. Lesson 1 was the mastermind. Lesson 2 was a definite chief aim. Lesson 3 is self-confidence. Lesson 4 is the habit of saving. Lesson 5 is initiative and leadership. 6 is imagination. 7 is enthusiasm. He really gets into that. 8 is self-control. 9 is the habit of doing more than you're paid for. 10 is a pleasing personality. 11, accurate thinking. 12, concentration. 13, cooperation. 14, profiting by failure, learning from your mistakes. 15th is tolerance. 16th is the golden rule. Man, how many did I say there were? 16? I guess what he added was the 17th principle, which is cosmic habit force. So that last one he added later. And when you listen to him talk about it to this audience in 1948, because he wrote the book in 1928, he's saying, since I wrote the book, I've heard all these stories from people, and they've talked about how once they had a goal, once they focused on it, now he never used the term big, hairy, audacious goal or 10X goal. He just said a very concrete, definite goal, and they took action towards it, and that's how they got to where they want to go. So the comparison between Napoleon Hill, to me, and Benjamin Hardy and Dan Sullivan's book is that you set a goal, you work towards it. The wilder and crazy and impossible it is, according to Hardy, the more it causes you to change your behavior in the present. Napoleon Hill didn't use all that, but he just used this cosmic force. He said that he didn't understand, but that he thought it was a cosmic law, a cosmic force that helped you get where you want to go once you were sure about that. Now, let's contrast that to Wayne Dyer and then Mike Dooley, kind of doing this in order. So Wayne Dyer came before Dooley, and Wayne Dyer's primary book is called Wishes Fulfilled, Mastering the Art of Manifesting. And he wrote that in 2012. It's a great book. It really changed the way I thought about a lot of things. His his main thing is the power of intention. That his manifestation philosophy is that you have to align your thoughts and energy with your desires. And it has to be very much an emotional thing, positive thinking, visualization, and faith, and that you create a mental and emotional state that attracts these things to you. So there's some differences here. Basically, he talks about you being in a specific state that attracts things to you, whereas, Hardy and Napoleon Hill are action-oriented, doing things. But again, there is some force that Dyer doesn't know how to describe it, except that he thinks it's faith-based or the universe that brings these things to you once you're in the right state to attract things to you. Now, the last thing that I want to talk about is Mike Dooley. And his primary book is Infinite Possibilities, The Art of Living Your Dreams. And Mike is also really big on manifestation. His primary principle is thoughts become things. So that what you think is what your thinking causes things to happen. That's a little bit different than Hardy, where Hardy's thing with the 10X thing is that what you're thinking that you want out there is what causes you to change your behavior in the present. Mike Dooley's thing is whatever you're thinking that you want. And he teaches this, and I've been through his course, that you focus on what it is that you want and you manifest it. Again, he stresses positive thinking, visualization, and the belief that the universe responds to thoughts. That it's a law. It's a universal law that what you think and what you bring into your life is your thoughts, and those things create your future. So he teaches to create a clear mental image of your desired outcome. Now, Dooley does also, I've heard him criticize that he does not talk about action so much. That is not really true. Mike Dooley does stress action, that you have to take action. You just can't decide, yes, I really, really, really want something and not do anything. He uses the analogy of, putting a GPS address in your car where you want to go, and you don't turn the car on. You just sit in your car. You're never going to get there. He stresses that you've got to at least put the car in gear and drive and start moving, and the GPS will eventually keep you on track and get you where you want to go. But one big difference between Mike Dooley is that he says that you don't necessarily need to take the right action. You just have to take action, and that the universe will guide you in the right way as you move towards your goal. So all those guys, all those books, I thought were really interesting, and that they're saying the same thing differently, that there's some force that causes things to happen. And whether it's caused by a future that's so big and so bold, the 10X thing, that it changes how you do things in the present, whether it's caused by the cosmic habit force that you're focused on a goal and things just align for you, or whether you attract it to yourself, according to Dyer, or whether thoughts become things with Mike Dooley, it's all talking about manifestation and getting where you want to go by thinking it and acting on it. Action's the big part. Out of those three, Hill, Dyer, Dooley, and Hardy, I'd say probably Dyer is the one that doesn't stress action so much. He focuses primarily on positive thinking, but they all talk about some kind of force, whether it's cosmic habit force or whatever you call it, that causes things to happen. So that's all I wanted to talk about. I want to get back to manifesting a little bit. I know some of you out there have listened to The Secret or watched The Secret, and I think that's kind of still a thing. And the whole Abraham Hicks papers are all about manifesting and attracting things to yourself. But those four authors, as I thought more and listened to this podcast by Hardy, just made me realize that, it's not just nut jobs that are talking about manifesting. It's some pretty serious people. And although Hardy and Sullivan don't use that term, a lot of what they said resonated with me in terms of manifesting. So thank you for listening. It's a little bit shorter this today. And again, if you want to comment on any of this, I really appreciate it. My website is mikenicholas.com. And of course, I read all the comments there and respond to them. And if you want to leave me a review for this podcast or any review at either the website or the podcast, I really appreciate it. It helps other people find me easier. And that's what I'm looking for, is more people that listen. So thank you very much. Bye-bye.